Well, glory be and mercy me. We've done it yet again. Here we are, streaming away. Streaming away today. Oh, enjoying the complete and total collapse of the system, of the society. Isn't it wonderful? Isn't it wonderful? Oh, I actually had a really great weekend, I gotta tell you. Went to that open mic night. Good evening to you, Eric. I hope you're feeling well, bud. How was your weekend? Hope you're doing better. The went to the open mic night. It was actually really, really great. I was blown. I'm in all of my days playing open mic nights. I've never seen an open mic night on a Friday evening, especially on the Danforth. Right, like the Danforth, if you're not familiar with Toronto, is one of the big like commercial hubs. It's like where all the restaurants are. It's considered like a very, very hip happening place to be. And so to see an open mic night at a large sports bar, like it's not a hole in the wall, like this is a big establishment. So to see an open mic night at this place, I was on a Friday. I was very surprised. But then when I went there, it makes sense. I think they're taking advantage of the idea that there is a hunger for this. There is a hunger for this, and I think people. I did record my performance. I'm just being a laggard, and I haven't got it uploaded yet. And honestly, the big reason why I'm being a laggard is because I don't want to watch it. I just don't want to watch it. Right? I played 2020, and I think that didn't go over very well. I think there was it was the first song that I played for this guy, and the fellow that runs it, really lovely fellow, wonderful guy. Absolutely wonderful. I'm looking forward to continuously going back and interacting with this guy more and more. So DM, the way it works for the Discord is if you donate a single dollar, $1 to my Patreon, which is in the description, I can get you connected into the Discord, and that's how you get into the Discord, DM. And I've got to remain consistent on that. I don't have very many rules in regards to capital or any of this kind of stuff, but that is definitely one of them. And honestly, the Discord space has turned into a real solidarity place. I'm blown away at how active the Discord actually is. I still don't know what I'm doing with any of this. I still don't know what I'm doing with any of this. And so I'm so pleased and so happy that people are actively engaging in the Discord. You guys are the guys that are making things so wonderful. And so please do consider, it's just $1, right? And if you are donating $1 into the Patreon, maybe consider making it $2. Right, maybe consider upping it just a little bit, right? Every tiny little bit helps, guys. Good opportunity to say like, share, subscribe, right? Let people know I exist. And so I'm going to be spending Friday evenings at this open mic night, for sure. I played 2020, didn't go well, because the fellow that runs the place, like, nobody expects how big my voice is, right? Like, I can blow up people's sound equipment with my voice. And also, I think I'm considering it a lesson, which is that I think the crowd that's going out to that open mic night, the word is love. I think people want love at this point. They want happiness. They want to engage in nostalgia, and they want to engage in something more hopeful. People want that message of hope right now. And so to come out with a song like 2020, I think it didn't go over because I think people, like, that's not what they want to spend time on. They don't want to, they're not at a place where they're angry or they're grieving. It is a fairly old crowd as well, and I think that plays into it too. I think that song's more of like a grunge song that would go over well with like Gen Z, right? That kind of angst. So it'd be a younger kind of group. But then I played Antarctica was the final song. I played I Wish My Mom Was Here, and that went over very well. I think the song that's going to really, like, should I become internationally famous, as we all know I shall be one day. The song that'll do it will be "I Wish My Mom Was Here," because I think it's universal, right? It's just universal, right? Like everybody, it's just a universal truth that there's been isolation, that people feel separated from family and friends and all of this kind of stuff over the pandemic, and so I think that element plays. But then it's also universal that we all lose our parents, right? That when I say I wish my mom was here, you know, we are all facing the reality of aging and growing old, and so there's a lot of, and then the message itself of the piece is that we are going to make this a better place to be, right? You guys are out, so I do have it recorded, but I just am like, I don't want to watch it. But I will upload it. I will upload it. It'll happen. Just keep bugging me about it, Eric, and that'll happen for sure. Did I watch the Jackson Hinkle Has versus Something debate and Destiny debate? No. I don't care about debate bros. I gotta be straight with you. Like, I went through a period of debate bros, right? Like, let's get these guys who have a YouTube channel and these guys and get them all in a room together without a moderator and let them hash it out. It's annoying. It's annoying. I can tell you what happened in that debate without watching it, right? That Jackson Hinkle and Has is not great in debates, honestly. Like I'm unimpressed with him. Like, I'm glad that he's doing what he's doing and he's trying to figure things out and he's getting involved and he's being a figure in the movement, but I just wish that he was less participatory, because he's not good at it. He really isn't, and opens himself up a lot, like to, like if you want to find the person that people will point to in order to discredit the movement, it's going to be Has. Jackson Hinkle, on the other hand, is just a young man, right? So he's got a lot of spunk and a lot of spirit. But the reality is, all of these guys just disrespect one another. Like, that's what it comes down to. Like, it's not actually about having a conversation. It's not actually about being like, okay, here's an aspect of this that I would like to reveal, and then we can discuss the reality of what we're saying to one another. It's usually just like fact shouting and then ignoring each other's facts, right? Like, if you just ignore what one another say and then it usually just turns into bickering, right? Just asinine gish-galoshing and bickering. And so I'm not interested in spending much time watching it, especially like Adam Something is like an alt-right, far-right guy who pretends like he's not, but he is. And then Destiny's a liberal. So like, I just don't think it's interesting. Like, I really don't. Like, they're not interesting people. They're not interesting figures. They've managed to gather a bunch of support. I mean, Adam Something's support basically comes from the fact that he makes this claim that he was on the far right and then he became progressive, and so he got a lot of goodwill. And he makes like funny videos and all that kind of stuff. And that's fine, but like, he's not an interesting figure. He's often sort of silly in my view. And then Destiny, he gets his support because he was a StarCraft player, right? And then he transitions from video games into politics because I think that was his interest. But at the end of the day, he's a liberal, right? He's never actually worked a real job. He doesn't actually have a perspective of the world, you know, in a way that anyone would consider meaningful, right? Like, he's sympathetic, I think, to socialist or left-wing ideas. But just when you watch the Richard Wolff Destiny conversation, you realize pretty quickly that Destiny's more or less clueless. He doesn't actually know what's going on, right? And then also, like, Jackson Hinkle, I like Jackson Hinkle. He's young. He's just young, right? But in the end, do I really want to spend 2 hours watching four kind of clueless young men shit on each other and not really formulate anything? It's not what I want to do. It's not what I want to produce. It's not what I want to engage in. Like, if I were to have a conversation with any of these guys, I would hope that it would be a more solidarity building experience. Like, I started thinking this way when I saw the Jackson Hinkle Sam Cedar conversation or debate or whatever you want to call it. And I really realized, like, there's so much disrespect that when Hinkle was speaking with Sam Seder, he wasn't speaking with him with an understanding of who Sam Seder was. And like he had this, it was like he had this huge chip on his shoulder, like he was going to expose Seder somehow, or he was going to discredit him somehow, or take him down a peg. There's always that feeling of that kind of way of interacting, that I'm going to take you down a peg, and that's my goal, and that's my objective. And I just think that that's boring. Like if that's how these guys are going into these conversations, it's not only that I think it's wrong to do, and I do think it's wrong to do, it's that I think it's boring. I don't think it's interesting. A far more interesting and effective thing to do would be to go into a conversation with a guy like Sam Seder and accept who he is, and accept that his position, like Hinkle didn't expose Seder. Like he didn't like get Seder to say like, oh yeah, I support the squad, and oh my god, like we all know, right? And he's very upfront about it, and it's not irrational for him to hold these opinions, right? And a far more interesting position to take is just to accept this, just to be like, yeah, like Sam Seder's like kind of a liberal on the left side of that spectrum, right? Like a squad, right? Like a Bernie Sanders sort of style social democrat, maybe you could get him into, right? But rather than be affronted by this, or to believe that there's something wrong with this position, and you can disagree with it certainly, but it's not irrational. Accept it, and then begin asking poignant questions that maintain the respect of Sam Seder. Like, we should be respecting one another when we get into conversation with one another, even as we disagree with each other. Because someone like, and just today I'm watching this conversation between Jimmy Dore and Peter Schiff. Right? Peter Schiff is like a fundamentalist free market capitalist. But what I like about Peter Schiff is that he's honest about what's happening in the world, right? He doesn't fall into delusions most of the time. He's willing to live in reality up until probably the top percentile, up until like the meta sense of things, which is that he's a free market capitalist, he's a free market fundamentalist. He thinks that the solution is for the government to deregulate and let the free market decide. So he doesn't accept that the government is owned, right? He doesn't accept that their owners, private owners, own the government and they are acting in the way that they do. But he's honest about what he says he sees within the market and the market forces, which makes him useful and interesting, and he's got quite a large following. And so if I were to interact with someone like Peter Schiff, I wouldn't go into the conversation being like, I'm going to take you down a peg, I'm going to try to do all this kind of stuff and alienate yourself from them and thereby their following, right? I would go into the conversation being like, okay, Peter Schiff, here's a guy who's been doing this a long time. Here's a guy who's been in this debate and in this sector and in this sphere for a long time, who's been and has been right about many things, and has been willing to stand on his analysis, even if it alienates him from other opportunities and things like this. And so that's where I hope these quote-unquote debate bros, and that's where I hope the society begins to shift to, is I hope they begin looking at these debate bro conversations as childish, because that's what I look at them as. I think that they're childish, right? They're not helpful. It's just young men bickering about bullshit and then like throwing poop. It's like monkeys throwing poop, right? It doesn't inform, it doesn't resolve, it doesn't, and you don't, and the people who are talking with one another genuinely don't accept each other's positions. That's the most frustrating part, right? Like if I was to get into conversation with someone like Adam something and start talking about the Donbass war, well, the whole conversation would grind to a halt, wouldn't it? Right? It would just grind to a halt, and there would be no real conversation surrounding the reality of the Donbass war and the lead up to the Russian invasion, right? And if you don't know or won't talk about the Donbass war, then you can say what you like about the situation in Ukraine, right? You can say what you like. You can take whatever position you like, because it doesn't matter, because you're not basing your opinions in the historical material facts of the lead up to the war. And that's more or less what happens with these kinds of conversations. And it's just not It's not what I want to do. It's not what I want to produce. It's not what I'm interested in, and it's not what I'm interested in consuming. Because I don't find it to be informative. I don't find it to be interesting. It's a clash of egos, and I don't care about any of those guys at all. Like, I find them to be quite dismissive and annoying, frankly. Like, you talk about, like, the cult of personality. That's more or less what you're seeing there. It's just the cult of personality, right? That people are grabbing a hold of whatever little personality cult they can grab a hold of. And it's something I think about for myself, like how much of my small following is just like cult of personality. How many of you guys are out there just being like, I like this guy, I like what he's presenting, I think he's got a cool vibe and all of this kind of stuff. But I try to balance that or move away from that by staying in the truth, in maintaining what is real. That's what I'm always attempting to do. And if somebody, and this is, I think, the thing that the debate bros could never accept, which is what I think separates me from the debate bros, which is that if somebody provides a piece of evidence that is real and factual, I want to accept it. I don't want to defend it or deflect it or dismiss it because it counters my worldview. I want to accept it. And I want to be able to accept it in real time and to be able to add it to the mosaic of facts and evidence and truth that make up my worldview. And I think that would be surprising for these debate bros to encounter, right? Like, I don't know that they would be able to handle that idea. I don't know what they would do to somebody who, if they were like, well, what about this? And they would provide this evidence and I would look at it and speak the truth to it instead of just dismiss it, which is what happens, right? Like, that's what debate bros do with one another. They just show each other, and they are showing evidence. Like, they are showing evidence. Like, and that's what makes these, that's the promise of these sorts of ideas, right? That the promise of debate broing is that you're showing evidence to one another and then there'll be some kind of middle ground, right? But that never happens because it's not, we live in a post-truth and a post-fact society. We're not actually having, we don't actually care about facts and evidence. Like, everything is so emotionally driven at this point, and everyone is living in just such a heightened emotional space that people can exist in it without, I mean, this is Donald Trump to a T. He's an expert at it. He's an expert at manipulating emotions, and he's an expert at moving the emotions of the people he's speaking with. It doesn't matter if what he says is true, right? What matters is the emotional resonance that it has with the listener. And that's more or less what I see happening with these debate bros, is that you've got groups of people who are like, oh, I love Destiny, I loved it when he played StarCraft, and oh yeah, I love talking to him, and he's got like, and Destiny has mastered the art of just rapid fire speech, you know, like this is Ben Shapiro to a T, right? You can be a moron, like Ben Shapiro is, like a moron, like low level, like in the bottom 20th% of the society in terms of intelligence. Ben Shapiro lives there. He's not intelligent. And in fact, unintelligent. So you can live there, but as long as you've mastered the art of speaking really fast, you appear smart, right? And so that's Destiny and Ben Shapiro. I think Destiny is smarter than Ben Shapiro, but Destiny just has the rapid-fire speech pattern that makes him sound intelligent when he's kind of just clueless. So he's average, I would say. Adam something, he just gathers, like, he speaks with this kind of smooth, swarthy-sounding accent, so to English speakers it sounds intelligent. He's also got this narrative of I was a far-right guy and now I'm a progressive, like how I gave up my far-right. When in reality, like when you listen to anything he says, he's still on the far-right. Like, his positions are very far-right, most of the time. And then Haz is incomprehensible to me. I think he's the epitome of just persistence pays, you know, that there is one of the things I've been really thinking about recently, because I've been playing a lot of Elden Ring recently, which is that you only need to win once, you know, that if you find yourself in a situation where you're grinding against it, you're losing, you can't get through, you can't break through, well, you only need to win once. right? And Has, I think, is the epitome of this. That when he speaks, he sounds incomprehensible to me. I see him struggling with himself, which that's kind of what I find endearing about him. But, like, we don't need to see those struggles in public. And then Jackson Hinkle, I think, is more or less an opportunist, as all young men in capitalist societies are. That if he had have been running a YouTube channel and then suddenly extreme far right people have been like, hey, Jackson Hinkle will pay you $100,000 a year to do our show, he would have done it. And he, very, very straightforwardly, I think. Like, early in his career, he's a fisherman, right? You put your rod in and you catch what you catch, and that's what you catch. And now Hinkle is more on Jimmy Dore's show, which I think is a comfortable place for him, which I think is good. And boy howdy, what a journey for him to end up on Jimmy Dore's show, right? What an incredible story, in fact, for Hinkle. So, in terms of, I've been talking a long time about this, but I just think, like, I don't care to watch, like, Vosh and Hakeem talk to one another. Like, I don't, they're not conversationalists. They're not actually attempting to find a middle ground or a solidarity with one another. They're really just trying to put on a show to pilfer viewers from each other. That's really what they're there to do. And I don't watch any of them in the first place because I don't find any of them to be very interesting in the first place. And so, I just don't participate. Have you heard of the Anarchist Cafe on Jarvis Street? The owner is a commie ideologue. Yeah, I've heard about this. And there's also big things happening throughout Canada right now where you're seeing lots of restaurants begin to eliminate tipping culture. This happened in my own cafe. We've eliminated tipping, we raised our prices, and now the staff gets a percentage of the sales, right? So we get our normal wage, but then we also get a percentage of the sales. So it's like the tip is built in to the entire system, and it's a good way to increase the pay of the workers and also tie in an incentive for the workers to, like, I want to sell more, right? Of course I want to sell more, right? If I sell more, it's direct pay for me, right? So it's more worker control. It's giving more impetus to the worker. It's rewarding the worker for the work that the worker does, right? Of course, it's not perfect. It's not direct worker control, but you're seeing these attitudes start to spread throughout the culture in more serious ways. As much as we bitch about how our politics is collapsing, right? Well, the culture is responding. Right? And politics, this is something interesting that I've been thinking about a lot recently too, which is that politics is the last stop, right? That politics is usually the place where the final stage of expression from the populace, right? That the culture expresses itself first, and then the political class responds to what the culture has already done. Right? You think about, like, marijuana legalization or marijuana decriminalization, right? That the culture itself begins to see and view marijuana as harmless and begins to see and view marijuana as ubiquitous and fine, more or less. And then it's the political class responds to this and says, hey, we'll decriminalize it. And everybody goes, yeah, we've basically been treating it that way already. It's just you and your goddamn cops that think otherwise, right? And so So to me, I'm seeing myself more and more as being someone who shifts the culture more than I shift the political landscape, right? That I still think what I'm doing is political, but it's not electorally political. And so, I'm going through a real period of, like, what is it that I'm doing? What is it that I'm trying to achieve? That open mic night was very lovely for me. It was very lovely and very eye-opening in regards to where I need to be focusing my energy and what I need to be doing. And, like, I'm of course, I want our society to improve, and of course, I want us to become more politically savvy and politically aware, without a doubt. But I feel like my goal in this is to shift hearts and minds and shift people's perspective of what's going on in their own societies on that cultural level, right? Like, if Doug Ford voters actually thought, we should care about the poor, like our Bible tells us, well, then Doug Ford probably would be talking that way too, right? So it's about changing hearts and minds and changing people's perceptions of each other. And focusing again always on that idea of love, right? That we need to be loving one another and finding a way to befriend one another. Which, not to bring up the debate bros thing again, but to me that's the number one reason why I can't tolerate it, because that's not what they're there to do. They're not there to understand and compromise and love one another, right? And to be comradely and to try to find a way to unify, right? They're just there to pilfer each other's audiences in order to boost their own profile so that they can make more money, because that's the only way to do it, right? Get more followers, get more money. It's very straightforward. And so you're just watching kind of capitalism infect even the idea of discourse. I despise it. As of something, exactly. I would say that Has performed a lot better and did not do any cursing or anything. He was a lot more respectful. That's good to hear. I'm glad to hear that. Like I said, I think this about Has and Hinkle is that they're both young men who are obviously struggling, right? I just don't need to watch them do it. I only watch it to see the other side opinion, but in general, I do agree with you. Those debates are completely meaningless. After all, as you say, it just gets into this shouting match. Yeah, like that's really what it comes down to. And the lesson I think that I'm learning, because my feeling is that the population is usually correct, that the zeitgeist energy is usually correct, right? That's something that me and Stephen Harper agree on. Stephen Harper thinks this way too. That the zeitgeist that exists within the populace is usually correct. And it's, when you think about it, that's the backbone of democracy, right? That's the idea behind democracy, is that the mass of the people are usually correct in the way that they express themselves, in the way that their political opinions exist on. And so what I'm learning is it's less about being right, right? And more about just spreading love. And that's what I think I've learned at that open mic night, is that when I go there, I've got to not inflict my grief and anger on the listener, but accept that they already exist in that space of grief and anger, and that I'm there to alleviate it, or at least connect with them and respect their desire for some reprieve, right? Anyway, debate bros always seem like wrestling to me. Yeah, it's got that kind of a quality to it. Like, it's not real, you know. It's not actually trying to resolve anything, you know. And of course, here's how much profit big oil ranked in last year, right? Shell 9.1 billion, Chevron 6.3, BP 6.2 billion, Exxon 5.4. They're not raising prices to cover their costs. They're raising prices to pad their profits. Like, that's really what it is, that this inflation grift, this inflation idea is a lie, right? That they're saying, the prices are inflating, but if it were the case that it was inflation, if it were the case that it was just economic forces exclusively, and that they're responding to the economic forces as they're being presented, well, then you would expect like a plateauing of their profits. Like, if they made $2 billion last year, well, and if they were complaining about inflation and having to do all this kind of stuff, well, you would expect it to be $2 billion, that there would be a plateauing, or at least the line would be increasing ever so gently, right? And but that's not what's happening. They're making record profits. They're making more money than they've ever made, right? It's 100% just them raising prices and then blaming it on something other than that. And it's going to blow up. It's going to blow up in big and serious ways. This is another reason why I do point out this conversation. Runaway inflation is about to collapse the U.S. economy with Peter Schiff. The reason why I point this out with Peter Schiff, I don't agree with everything. I certainly don't agree with him as a free market fundamentalist. Certainly not. But he was right about the 2008 collapse. He's been right about every collapse that has happened in America since he has been around. And so that by itself means that he's worth listening to, because he's willing to tell the truth about the society that he lives in. And his position, of course, is that, yeah, of course we need to tell the truth. How can you be a good investor? How can you participate in the system of capital if you're not honest about what's going on within the markets? And this, of course, is where he gets a little... and you can watch his conversation with Richard Wolff to see this writ large, where Richard Wolff pegs him, basically. Peter Schiff tries to do that. Oh, it's the government's fault. It's the government's problem. We need to deregulate the government. And Wolff just says, who owns the government? Like, who owns the government, bud? Like, it's the private sector that owns the government. And so scapegoating the government isn't going to solve any of these problems. But I still think this is a worthwhile conversation, because this should be a huge alarm bell. Like, we're seeing Jamie Dimon saying out loud that we're going to experience an economic hurricane, right? And they're going to do everything they can to blame it on Russia. They're going to do everything they can to just blame it on anything other than what is actually happening, which is that the system of capital itself is corrupt, right? And we're going to see a recession occur in this country that, like, we're going to call it a recession, but it's going to be worse than the Great Depression, right? Yeah, George Soros, Mr. Schwab own Justin Trudeau. I mean, I don't even think it's as, like, specific as this, right? Like, Justin Trudeau just operates on behalf of capital in the billionaire class, right? Like, he's in the pocket of these billionaires, right? Meanwhile, just to remind everybody, right? Jesus said to his disciples, "Amen, I say to you, it will be hard for one who is rich to enter the kingdom of heaven. Again, I say to you, it is easier for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than for one who is rich to enter the kingdom of God." I'm seeing more and more on the left, there's this ironic usage of the Bible, right? But more and more I'm encouraging people, the more you learn about the Bible, right, the book that these people profess to follow, the more you see how disconnected they are and detached from it in big and significant ways, right? And so it behooves us as leftists, secular leftists, I should say most of us are, right, with some exceptions, to become more prolific and more, to increase our expertise on the Bible. Because the more expert we become on the texts that they profess to follow, the more that we can show that they're not even following their own Christ. So why should we? Right? That's kind of my statement, right? They keep telling us how important the Bible is. It's like, yeah, but you don't follow it, so why should I? Right? Meanwhile, first unionized Starbucks in Texas. Starbucks across America have been unionizing like mad, right? And it's for good reason, right? Most of your Starbucks workers are artists, right? Where are the artists? They're working at Starbucks. That's what's going on. And so you've got already kind of a leftist sort of vibe, sort of a left of liberal vibe happening amongst workers in Starbucks in the first place. Also, the amount of people who work at a Starbucks, an individual Starbucks, is quite small, so organizing them is easier to do. And frankly, I think there's just been a dominoing effect of, like, one Starbucks unionized and then another and then another and then another, and now you have, like, I know whenever I walk into a Starbucks, I'm asking these guys if they're going to unionize, right? I know that there are populaces and consumers who are likely looking at Starbucks and being like, hey, you guys should unionize, right? I think that it's, and we're seeing, as this catastrophe unfolds in front of us, right, people are really beginning to realize, like, oh, like, if we don't grab each other, our fellow workers, and actually attempt to find solidarity and unify together, we will be abandoned. Like the pandemic proved that beyond the shadow of a doubt. Like I myself was completely abandoned by a company that I gave 5 years to, right? I was the assistant manager of the store, and they just were like, nah, get the fuck out, right? Because it made them a penny, right? And so is Starbucks revolution the beginning? It's just another thing, right? It's historians and people who look back love to try to say, what was the beginning, right? Like, what was the beginning of the fall of the Roman Empire, right? But there's never a beginning. It's just the passage of there's usually like one moment where everybody goes, this is when it was official. Like, this is the moment when everybody admitted, that's it, it's over, right? And we're not there yet. Like, we all know the American empire is coming to an end, that it's collapsing. But when will be the moment, like the moment when we all agree that that's the case? To be determined. To be determined. But we're here to document it. Here's an article that came out of Rolling Stone that I really wanted to focus on because I think it's important for everybody to know who Stephen Dongzinger is, right? And this is a Rolling Stone article. So I'm going to be reading this one. How Stephen Dongzinger became the boomer hero of the millennial left. I find it kind of odd that they're doing like a boomer millennial thing here because it's an odd framing, but nonetheless, a good man to know. His story is incredible. He has an incredible story. In a room full of beards and beanies, DSA types, leftist podcasters, and Dimes Square affiliates, Stephen Dongzinger, tall, striking, and 60, stood out from the younger crowd. On a Wednesday night at Williamsburg, Brooklyn's trendy babies all right, known for their hosting indie upstarts like Porsches and Wet Leg, one could be forgiven for thinking Dongzinger, dressed in a shirt and blazer, was somebody's chaperone. But the former environmental justice lawyer, just released from almost 1,000 days of house arrest and confinement for his role in a $99.5 billion suit against Chevron, was the crowd's Okay, John, focus. Was the young crowd's guest of honor, speaking on a panel alongside activists and indie acts. It's been exhilarating at every level, says Dongzinger, of his appearance at Babies, a block party in his honor days before, and freedom in general. I was on indefinite house arrest. I was 2 years and 2 months without a trial. I didn't know when the trial would come. To have that lifted is a great thrill. Though many of the supporters in the room probably weren't born when Mr. Dongzinger first filed suit against Chevron, it's not difficult to see why young leftists are flocking to his case. The particulars of his story, a crusade for environmental justice, the near unstoppable will of the fossil fuel industry, the wielding of the U.S. criminal justice system by a multinational conglomerate, are all pet issues for the reformed-minded left. In the past month alone, he's attracted endorsements and interviews by the likes of Will Menaker, one of the hosts of the Brooklyn-based Chapo Trap House, and Amazon labor union organizer Chris Smalls. This exposure has further helped expose a younger, internet-literate left to Dongzinger's story, turning him into an icon of environmental activism and a martyr of corporate sabotage. Dongzinger's story began in the early 1990s, shortly after he graduated from Harvard Law School, when he was contracted by the Amazon Defense Coalition. The government-recognized legal defense team and environmental outreach program was asking for aid in prosecuting Chevron on behalf of 30,000 Ecuadorians, including 5 Amazonian tribes affected by the corporation's drilling operations. Drilling in the Lagos Agrio oil fields, overseen by Texaco, before the company was bought by Chevron, dates as far back as the 1970s and has wreaked environmental havoc for decades. A 1993 suit, filed in part by Dongzinger, alleged that Texaco knowingly dumped 17 million gallons of crude oil in the Ecuadorian rainforest, leaving in its wake a 1,700 square mile area of devastation akin to an Amazon Chernobyl. Chevron denied wrongdoing, blaming the contamination on Petroecuador, the country's national oil company and a former partner of Texaco's, and arguing that Texaco had conducted a $40 million cleanup that the Ecuadorian government had deemed sufficient, pushed to move the trial from New York, where the suit was filed, to Ecuador, which does not use juries in judicial proceedings. But in 2011, after decades of work, the Ecuadorian courts ordered Chevron to pay out $9.5 billion to the people of Ecuador. Shortly after the ruling, Chevron reportedly moved their assets out of Ecuador and launched a counter-litigation campaign against Dongzinger, filing an RICO charge against him in 2011. In 2014, after a civil case hinging on a witness coached over 50 times by Chevron, Dongzinger was found guilty in a bench trial of racketeering, extortion, wire fraud, money laundering, obstruction of justice, and witness tampering by federal judge Lewis Kaplan in the Southern District Court of New York. Among other findings, Judge Kaplan found that Dongzinger and Associates had ghostwritten an environmental report that had been used as a crucial piece of evidence and had bribed a judge. Following the civil suit, Kaplan drew up criminal contempt charges against Dongzinger for his refusal to turn over his electronics and appointed a private firm with ties to Chevron to prosecute, ultimately resulting in Dongzinger's disbarment, home confinement, and a brief stint in prison. Chevron, for their part, continued to deny responsibility for the underlying environmental allegations and refer to Dongzinger as an unscrupulous con man. When reached for comment, a spokesperson for the corporation, a lawyer for Gibson, Dunn, and Crutcher, reiterates the company's stance. U.S. courts and an international arbitration tribunal in The Hague have ruled the Ecuadorian judgment against Chevron was the product of fraud, bribery, and extortion by Stephen Dongzinger and others. Today, Mr. Dongzinger is an adjudicated racketeer convicted of criminal contempt who was disbarred for egregious professional misconduct in the Ecuador case. He was fired by his Ecuador clients years ago for refusing to disclose how he spent tens of millions of dollars raised in their name. Dongzinger alleges that Chevron's influence extends to the courts and beyond, into the realm of media, where Dongzinger has long lamented that his story isn't getting the coverage it deserves. Chevron has representatives that exert significant influence over the corporate media. There's no other way to put it, Dongzinger says. While recently coverage has been picked up, Dongzinger says he firmly believes that entities that depend on ad revenue from the fossil fuel industry are ignoring the story. But years of outreach seem to have paid off in grassroots support for Dongzinger, in addition to independent media, including podcasters like Menaker, who Dongzinger credits for getting eyes on his story when the national news wouldn't. An open-door policy at Dongzinger's home also boosted his profile. Since the beginning of his house arrest, Dongzinger's handsome, bookcase-lined Upper West Side apartment has served as a meeting place and staging ground for conversations and collaborations with activists, politicians, journalists, and celebrities, with many posting on social media and dated to Dongzinger's number of days in confinement. Day 67, Manari Ushigwa, shaman of the Sapara Nation of the Amazon. Day 640, Sting, and later into his stay, Maureen Williamson, Lucy Lawless, Adam Met of pop act AGR. If Dongzinger's take-all customers approach earned him arguably as much attention with environmental justice-minded celebrities as it did with human rights lawyers, it also cannily caught the attention of organizers like Chris Smalls, introduced to Dongzinger through a mutual friend who saw similarities in their struggles. He came over for dinner and I learned a lot by talking to him, said Dongzinger. We found that we had a lot in common in terms of our respective campaigns against these mega corporations disrespecting workers and indigenous people, so we ended up staying in touch. Though Dongzinger strikes a modest note, it's evident through his social media and his own admissions that his role as spokesperson for environmental justice and against corporate overreach was carefully cultivated. If people choose to see me as a positive example or something that inspires them to do this very important climate justice work, I'm more than happy to play that role, said Dongzinger. I love speaking to young people, and I always try to take the time to share these experiences so people know what the work is and how important it is. Blake Ortiz Goldberg of hyper pop act Blake the Man 1000, who helped organize the event at Babies, was introduced to Dongzingers through a journalist friend, was also welcomed to Dongzinger's apartment. I went over and brought a Bluetooth speaker and played some of my music for him, said Ortiz Goldberg. Enthusiastic and trying to expand his outreach to younger city residents, Dongzinger invited Ortiz Goldberg to play at his release party, which, at Ortiz Goldberg's suggestion, became the night at Babies. Menaker, who also appeared at Babies All Right, considers stories like Dongzinger's cautionary tales and exemplary victories all at once. They're object lessons in inspiring people to challenge real power, but also object lessons in what can happen if you do that of you, defy real power in this country. Nevertheless, Menaker still sees Dongzinger as a beacon of hope for the environmental justice movement. Though there are precious few examples of individuals fighting against megacorporations allowed to rack up a W, in Menaker's words, Dongzinger, at least for now, can count himself as one of them. Chevron's strategy is to crush the lawyer, said Dongzinger. The problem they have with me is that it didn't work. I kept going. Yeah, basically Chevron goes down to Ecuador, pollutes the place, shits all over them, destroys everything, as these oil companies always do, and then Dongzinger fought back, and they attempted to destroy him. Right? Like, this is the narrative of the fossil fuel industry. This is how they're going to operate. This is why I think these people should be incarcerated for their many crimes, right? Including simply lying about the existence of climate change, fomenting disinformation campaigns against the populace, right? Like, the amount of dismissal and skepticism that surrounds climate change can be directly linked to these frauds and phonies and liars in the fossil fuel industry who actively go out of their way to attempt to destroy people who try to fight back against them, right? Like, we are all in many ways Dongzinger, right? That if we attempt to stand up and if we create any kind of movement against them, they're going to actively seek to destroy us, right? And I'm just amazed they didn't just give them the cancer gun, right? Just give them the cancer gun. I don't know why they don't do that, but such is life. Good to see you, Major. Hope you're doing well. Have you heard of the Schiller Institute? I've not. Also, I'm currently reading David Graeber's book, The First 5,000 Years of Debt, a seminal text. David Graeber's First 5,000 Years of Debt is a very illuminating book. I do find it interesting the Catholic Church used to view debt lenders as the devil. Yeah. I mean, you're using an abstract... well, the fact that there's this popular Rolling Stone article means they just bought him off is all. Like, Methane, you're saying that you think that this Dongzinger fellow has just been bought off by big oil? I mean, I'd be very surprised by that. Like, they literally, he was in jail, he was on house arrest recently. Like, it seems like if there's a buy-off, like, I would need to see it. And I don't know that I would be if I was in Dongzinger's position, like, I don't know that I would be too keen to negotiate with these guys after everything they had done. But the book I'm reading right now that I would seriously recommend is Caliban and the Witch. I've heard good things. Sylvia Federici. Yeah, I mean, really when you think about what lending is, right? Like debt and creating debt is that you are creating a abstract, like you're creating an abstract chain, right? You're chaining someone to you through an abstraction. And that abstraction is this idea that, well, I loaned you something that is itself an abstraction, and so you've got to pay me back. And if you don't pay me back, then I can do serious and negative things to you. The result of this, of course, initially was the concept of a debtor's prison, right? Which is the stupidest idea alive when you think about it. Like taking somebody who can't pay their debt and then putting them in a position where they definitely will not be able to pay the debt, right? Like it's the reason why most religions create a debt jubilee, right? So that because that's the compromise. Oh, you want to put people in debt and you want to be lending and you want to do this kind of stuff. Okay, well, we're going to create a firm line, draw a line in the sand, and say if you want to do that, then we have an understanding that if they get into a position where they can't pay that loan back after 7 years, it's gone, right? And if you don't like it, then don't lend the money. It's I think debt jubilee is if you want to have this system of debtors and lenders, if you want to accept that that's something you're going to do, I think the only way that you can do it and maintain your moral credibility is by having something like a debt jubilee. And it's telling that we don't, and it's telling that we'll never do something like that, right? He'll start misleading environmental people down some random path instead of something productive. We'll see about that, Methane, but you're not wrong to bring this up. You're not wrong to bring this up, right? Like that's basically what we're seeing in the Liberal Party right now, right? That's basically been the Liberal Party's entire shtick, is to admit the crisis exists, even call it a crisis, right? Declare a climate emergency, but obviously do it just to mislead people, right? And so the question is this fellow going to do the same? Right? That sure, he had this hardship and sure, he's been working on this for a long time, but if they give him $100 million and just tell him to, but I think we'll have to, but while I think your skepticism is well met, I think we'll have to wait and see if that materializes in any kind of serious way. Because right now, we make our decisions on evidence, and right now I don't see the evidence that such a thing is actually happening. Yep. Oh no, and you're right to be, Methane. I'm not trying to discredit you. I'm not trying to discount you or even counter you. I think all I'm trying to encourage you on is to allow yourself to believe that there are still good people in the world. And until you see something that is firm, I mean, you think about Dongzinger, like he's been doing this since the 90s. So he's been doing it for 25 years. He's been fighting this fight, right? Like, if he could be bought off, or if there was a buy-off, why hasn't that already happened, right? Why hasn't that already happened? It's been 25 years. Why doesn't Chevron just shuffle him some money now? Like, why didn't they do it 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago, right? Why is it only now that Chevron is turning around and buying somebody like Dongzinger off? Right, and especially after they've like put in all of this effort to attack him with the American court system, to attack him with their media apparatus, to attack him with all of that kind of stuff, which would certainly be more costly to do than a simple buy-off, right? And the only answer that I can come with is that he won't be bought off, right? That's the only answer I can come up with. And so, but again, that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be skeptical and that we shouldn't have a critical eye of these sorts of things. So it's a bit of a mixed bag, isn't it? Matthias, good to see you. Elon is threatening to pull his cash out of Twitter if he doesn't get his way. Yeah, like nobody wanted you to be there in the first place, bud. Yeah, like, and I don't know. I more or less look at the Elon buying Twitter thing in the same way that I look at like the Johnny Depp Amber Heard trial. It's just distractionary news, right? It's not that interesting. In my view, like who cares? Like who gives a shit if Elon Musk owns Twitter? Like that, is it going to suddenly matter? Is Twitter going to suddenly be a different place? Is it fundamentally going to change the nature of how communication happens on Twitter? Even if it did, does that even matter? Who cares? It's fucking Twitter. Like I think this way about like the Johnny Depp Amber Heard trial. Like who gives a shit about this? Like, who cares if like. It's, I mean, certainly they care, right? Certainly Johnny Depp cares, right? Certainly Amber Heard cares. But why is it any different than any other, like, civil dispute case that I've ever seen? I saw an interesting tidbit that talked about, like, the Johnny Depp Amber Heard trial has gone on longer than any murder case or execution case in, like, the southern states ever. So we're spending more time focusing on something that is basically like, did she hit him or not, right? When we have literally sent people to the electric chair in less time. I know that and Queen's Jubilee are all over my news feeds, unfortunately. The trial was a don't look up moment for me. Which trial are you talking about there, Brandon? Good to see you, by the way. Was it more of a big deal than OJ? Yeah, exactly, right? And, like, the OJ trial was in many ways, the OJ trial was the first time the media apparatus showed people that you can seize the attention of the public away from other larger issues with a celebrity trial. And it's not like the it's not like the it's not like the OJ trial was unimportant, right? Like he was caught up in a murder trial, for God's sakes, and it became kind of a flashpoint for the discussions of race relations within America, right? So that had an interest of it. But at the same time that trial was going on, like I believe it was it Kosovo was happening at the same time? There was some kind of major conflagration that that the Clinton administration was embarking on that gets, like, no press and nobody talks about it at all, right? And it's because everybody's like, oh wow, did you see the glove didn't fit? Oh my God, like and yeah, the don't look up moment for me was Johnny and Amber. Yeah, it did. You're right about that, Brandwin. It does have this, like, because in my view it's so obvious. Like, that's the thing. Like, when I was younger and the OJ trial was going on, I was a bit like, oh man, that's like a murder, right? And you had the footage of him fleeing from the police, and there was the choppers in the air, and oh my God, like, it's such a huge deal. And it is like a celebrity that I have seen in movies who has, like, been who is in this murder case. Oh my God, murder! Right? Oh my God, right? Johnny versus Amber. Like, who gives a fuck? Like, I can't imagine giving a fuck about this. You know? Like, if I was Johnny Depp's friend, I would care. Because, like, I care about him as a friend. But, like, Johnny Depp is an actor. Like, I don't care about, like, I care about his work, right? And such that it is these last 10 years. But, like, and Amber Heard, like, I don't even know who this person is. Like, she was in Aquaman. Like, I don't give a fuck. I don't care about these people. I don't care. Like, if Johnny Depp suddenly was, like, not working anymore or any of this kind of stuff, I would be like, oh, that's unfortunate because he's a good actor, right? Like, his early work especially was extremely good, right? But, like, I can't imagine caring about this case. And the only reason that people do is because it gives them something else to talk about. It lowers the stakes of the conversation, right? And you can have these, like, arguments with one another about, like, oh, Johnny did it or Amber did it, and it's all harmless. It doesn't matter, right? And so instead of having more serious conversations, you're having these sort of faux, who gives a shit conversations with one another, right? And you're right, it does have that kind of, like, don't look up sort of quality of just, like, this is what we're spending all our time on. But it's not unique, right? Like, the death of Anna Nicole Smith, right? If you guys don't remember Anna Nicole Smith, she was a like, Playboy bunny or penthouse model who was in some movies throughout, like, the 90s. And she ended up, I believe it was ODing, right? She ends up dying. That moment gets more coverage in mainstream media than 9/11 did. Like, really fucking think about that. Like, Anna Nicole Smith dies, gets more coverage than fucking 9/11. Like, the media exists in order to distract the public. That's what it's for, right? Instead of doing, like, big, serious, having long conversations about the nature of what happened in 9/11 and actually digging in and being serious, they just distract it over to Anna Nicole Smith died and provided more coverage than even fucking 9/11. When I was younger, I was actually kind of proud. I didn't even know who the artists were called to the music I listened to or the actors in films. I just liked it or not. Well, and I mean, again, like, I think it's fine to be interested in actors as actors, right? But like this sort of, like, they're not your friends, you know? Like, they're not your friends. Like, it's not like you're watching Johnny Depp and like being like, oh man, my buddy Johnny, I hope he gets out of it, right? Yeah, just another version of e-talk. Yeah, it does have that kind of a quality about it, and we're happy to have it happen to us. I think, like, when the Johnny Depp versus Amber stuff started happening, I was like, okay, here we go, right? This is going to be like a month, and we're going to see this. It's been like how long has it been? It's been forever. Like, I feel like Johnny Depp versus Amber Heard has like been part of like our public consciousness now for like, has there ever been a time when we weren't talking about Johnny Depp and Amber Heard's fucking trial? People pay millions to people to play children's games. Not surprising they try to justify millions to people to play dress up and pretend. Well, but this is the thing. Like, I'm rather fond of it, right? Like, I think that people would do this naturally, right? Like, you talk about what's innate. Like, people say like capitalism is natural, right? Like, no, it isn't. Right? It's just an exploitation on the activities that we do as natural. And what are some of the things that we do that are natural, that we love to do? We play dress up and pretend, right? We absolutely do. Like, every improv show you've ever seen. There's a show that I love on Netflix called Middleditch and Schwartz. It's just two dudes, and they do an improv show. One of them is the guy that played, I forget his name, on Parks and Recreation. He was the guy with the big hair who would come in every so often and be like, woo, like that guy. And it's great. It's super great. It's just like they're making up a show right in front of you. It's improv. It's literally playing pretend. And I love it. I love it. And I think that, and like, you think about like stand-up comedy. Stand-up comedy is literally just a dude talking, right? Like a dude talking to you, right? And he's just professionally talking, you know? And that's natural, right? These are the natural things that humanity does, right? Is play, pretend, act, do all this kind of stuff. But we've attached to it this exploitive, extractive, abstract model that, and while simultaneously pretending like there's something natural about it. It's really weird. This Depp Heard drama was pretty big when Me Too was happening. Yeah, that's a fair thing to say, I suppose. Because it does sort of counter the believe all women narrative, I suppose. But it's just culture war shit, right? And now another entertainment second, Oprah. Yeah, good old Oprah, right? Proof that if your shtick is telling people to buck up, you can make it pretty far. You can make it pretty far. So, here's an article. I agree, nothing wrong with it, but there's everything wrong with the amount of money that goes to them, while so many other people working themselves into disability are getting scraps and abandoned. Yeah, I think you're onto something there, Matthias, that like, the amount of money that goes to these things really shows how much we love them as just humans and as people, but it also shows our kind of inability to have sober conversations about very real systems, like people who are in disability, right? Or like, why is food, like, it's at bottom, right? It's, again, why is food and shelter withheld from the populace at all? Why is there literally any mechanism? Like, really, this is my central thing. This is the reason why people started calling me a communist, is because I started asking a very clear, clean question. Why is there any mechanism that stands between a populace getting food and shelter? What, like, literally any mechanism whatsoever. Everyone needs food. Everyone needs shelter. These are necessities. These are demands that are inflicted upon humanity by the universe itself. Why are these things not ubiquitous? Why are these things not built into the system as necessary? Why is it that people need to justify their that they can get these things from a market by selling themselves to that market? Like, Why is there any impediment? Why is there any middleman in between you and shelter and food? And to me, that's the abhorrence of the system. Like that's the central core, deep abhorrence of the system. Because once you start picking at that, you begin to recognize how worthless it all is and how pointless, like, the landlords are. Like, landlording is just the stupidest shit in the world, right? And the idea that, like, we need to put the burden of the burden on the consumer instead of create some kind of collective understanding and collectivized system in order to say, well, yeah, like, the farmer gets paid for being a farmer, and he's got a house, and he's got the land, and he's got all this kind of stuff, and he grows the food, and he provides the food for the people who are living, and that's the arrangement, right? We're literally capable of printing the money, like clearly we can create systems of taxation or systems of like, if we can create a universal healthcare system in which everybody can interact with it without needing to pay into it directly, we can do the same with food. Like, there's nothing to stop us from doing it, right? The model is in front of us. We've already used it for other things. We can use it for food. We can use it for shelter. We just don't want to, right? We just don't want to, because we're unwilling to accept that a single individual, and this is the great hypocrisy and irony of the individualist crowd, is that they refuse to acknowledge that an individual matters more than abstract hierarchies and abstract systems, right? That subserviating yourself to a system of capital matters more than your rights or as an individual, right? That what freedom is to the libertarian right is selling yourself to a market dominated by billionaires, right? Being able to do what you think is right to do, or follow your artistic expression, or study, or research, or live a life free from this domineering capitalist system, like, none of that is considered freedom, right? What's considered freedom is subserviating yourself to it. That's considered freedom. That's mostly what sent me down this path. Like, you and I couldn't figure it out at all. It makes no sense. Can't get past it even now. Slowly making me crazier. That's mostly what sent me down this path. Like, you and I couldn't figure it out at all. It makes no sense. Can't bet. Slowly. Hold on, Methane. What are you talking about exactly there? Because are you talking about just this question of food and shelter? It is a bit crazy, isn't it? Yeah, that's part of the goal, to bend the sanity of the public, for sure. How much Ukraine will be in the mood for today? I saw a Ukrainian site run out of Langley, Virginia. I can tell you about, the food and shelter thing, right? It's ridiculous. It's fucking ridiculous. I saw a conservative who flat out said the ability to leave an employer or start a business is freedom. Right, but you can't do that. Like, you can't leave an employer, right? You don't have the food or the shelter to be able to be supported by that. Our society and our culture doesn't support that, right? How much Ukraine will we be doing today? If you can show me something interesting, I'll look it up. But I'm trying to stay closer to sources. The one thing that gets this channel demonetized is Ukraine conversation. Like, that's what gets this channel demonetized, or my videos demonetized. I've run the tests. Like, what happens every single time is that I do at the end of the night, I've got to go to the monetization of this video, and it's usually considered limited, and so then I need to challenge it. And then, like, 9 times out of 10, they flip it back and say, like, okay, you're open to add revenue. But the times where they say, no, this is still a limited video, are the times where I talk about Ukraine. Did you see the Ukraine kill list with journalists? Ever K. Bartlett for saying the kind of intelligent stuff we say about the war? I mean, okay, let's just bite the bullet. Let's just bite the bullet. So, Ukraine is definitely going to become at least ultra-nationalist, right? It has to. There's just no other path for it. Russia has essentially taken over the Donbass region, right? all of the like you have a great op-ed come out of I think it was the New York Times, could have been the Post, that was attributed to Biden, although I'd be surprised if he actually wrote it. That is starting to say that we need to consider a diplomatic solution, right? That clearly what's gone on is that Russia has taken over Donbass. It's threatening to take over other regions, right? The amount of military hardware that's actually getting into Ukraine and then also even making it to the front line of Ukraine is very, very limited. And not enough to actually sway things in the next direction. So already Russia is taking over the Donbass region and putting in its own administrative power, right? Which it's going to do. So this area, in my view, is already part of Russia, or already being set up to be called "quote unquote" independent, right? And a big reason why America is finally starting to say, okay, we need a diplomatic solution, is because if they don't find a diplomatic solution, Russia could just take this fucking place over, right? One thing that nobody actually talks about in the middle of this is that the Ukrainian forces are highly demoralized, right? Which of course they would be demoralized. Like, why shouldn't they be demoralized? Like, they're losing this war. They know they're losing this war. They know that this place is going to become at least an independent place, but it could also become absorbed by Russia. They know these things are coming. And also there is a fair bit of like, not everybody in the military is rah-rah Nazis, right? Not everybody in the military is like, oh, sweet, Azov Battalion, right? Rah-rah, right? Like, you saw this with when the foreign fighters appeared, right? There were all these stories coming out of the foreign fighters about how they were basically ignored, right? They were basically just told to hurry up and wait. Many of the freedom fighters that came out of it afterwards were just like, yeah, I left because they weren't utilizing me and I wasn't being used. It's like, yeah, like, the Ukrainian military itself is not actually going rah-rah, let's get these Russians, right? Like, because they know why the Russians are there. They know the score, right? Like, they're not bullshitting themselves the way that the West propaganda machine bullshits. So the question truly is, how much blood is Ukraine willing to spill? And here's oh, Eric's got an interesting one. Oh, how safe do I feel like clicking that? I actually don't feel safe clicking this right now. Sorry guys, I didn't actually check. It could be naughty stuff, I'm gonna be honest. Maybe we'll do that tomorrow, Eric. That's hilarious. That's hilarious. You know what I could do, actually? I could do this. This'll save everybody. This'll save everybody. I'm admitting it, guys. I'm admitting it. I'm a straight male with straight male pro. You can just look at my beautiful face. Hey, how you doing? And then we can go like this. All right, we're cool. We're cool. I admit it. I admit it. I like boobs. You like boobs. Let's not bullshit ourselves. We're all adults here, or at least we pretend to be. All right. Let's get back in the corner, John. Let's get back in the corner. Fucking God, get back in your corner. All right, we're back in the corner. We're back in the corner again. Oh, it's Canadian Dimension. Good source. Good source. Oh well, you're right. David Lynch numbers. Nice beard, John. Oh yes, it's coming back. Here, hold on. Okay, first things first, guys. David Lynch numbers. Link for research purposes. I respect it. Why did I go to Google Maps, dude? Why did I do that? YouTube. Oh, there's 15 of you here. Perfect. I'm glad that I confessed my deep, dark desires to you all. All right, here we go. I'm in with a 7.
Here we go for today's number. It's June 6, 2022. 10 balls. Each
half of 8 is 3, that's right.
Number.
Oh wow, we're all doubling down on 7.
Numbers
okay.
1 through 10.
Is today the day?
Swirl
Come on.
the numbers.
Swirl the numbers. Vermacht. Come on, Vermacht. We can do it. We can do it.
Pick
We
a
can do
number.
it. And here we are.
Today's number is 8.
8. Fuck you, David Lynch. If it's not an 8, it's a 6. If it's not a 6, it's an 8. Fuck, guy. All right, what do we got? We got Ligandese with an 8. We got DM with an 8. Ding, 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 ding. And Loaf. Half of 8 is 3, right? So you can get a half victory. Tons of 7s. Tough tits for the 7s today. Too bad. Too bad. Yeah, that's fun. I just wanted to mention Ava K. Bartlett. The site with list isn't stream safe, so don't bother yet. But this gets us this. I think this is a good article. We're going to read this. A guy knocked on my door 7 times today. Whoa, creepy. The Ukraine-Russia conflict is now in its most dangerous phase since it began in 2014 after the Western-backed overthrow of the Ukrainian government. Statements by Russian leaders and the Russian military build up along Ukraine's borders suggest that the dangers of a significant escalation in the Donbass is real. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky failed to fulfill his election promises to end the war and resolve the armed conflict in the breakaway eastern region peacefully. This is because the military doesn't respond to Zelensky. This is something I don't hear spoken about very often, and I just wanted to pause the article for a second to bring it up. Like, Zelensky was elected on a platform to bring peace. This is the thing that I keep trying to affirm to people who are saying, like, well, Zelensky's a Jew, right? Like all this kind of, but it doesn't matter, right? It's beside the point. The military isn't responding to Zelensky. They don't care what he thinks, right? This is the reason why funding far-right groups is a bad idea, because you can't actually control them. They have their own agendas, and they're operating on those agendas. And if you suddenly are like, hey, can you stop doing that thing that you're doing? Their response is, shut the fuck up. That's it, right? And if it comes down to like, we need to negotiate a settlement with one another. Oh my goodness, we have to talk it out. They will just shoot you, right? They'll just shoot you, right? So Zelensky is literally a stooge. He has no power. He has no authority. No one cares what he says. The only thing that Zelensky has that's of any value to anyone is that the West has pumped him up so big, he's become an international celebrity, so that any document he signs will be seen as credible by the international community. And that's the only valuable thing he brings to the table anymore. None of his agenda is being listened to. Nobody cares what he thinks. NATO doesn't care. The United States doesn't care. He's the definition of a pawn, right? He's a definition of a pawn. Maybe a bishop. Talks between the United States and Russia, following Russian government demands on written guarantees to stop NATO expansion and, in particular, reject Ukraine's membership in the alliance, despite its extreme unlikelihood, are not anticipated to resolve the standoff. U.S. President Joe Biden, his top officials, Western media, and some military experts cited U.S. intelligence reports and the Russian military buildup near Ukraine's borders as evidence of Russian plans to invade Ukraine this winter. What article is this? This is from January. Oh yeah, but this is good for like. Okay. Journalists, including David Sanger of the New York Times, suggest the same. However, a full-scale Russian ground invasion and occupation of the entire territory of Ukraine appears to be less likely than a more limited use of military force. This could include Russian recognition of independence of the self-proclaimed separatist republics of the Donbass, an open deployment of Russian troops and advanced weapons in the separatist-controlled region, a seizure of eastern and southern regions of Ukraine, or missile and airstrikes of Ukrainian military targets in the Donbass and other territories. This article is interesting because it's from January, so it's from before this all happened, right? So you see that there were writers. This guy here, Ivan Kacchanovsky, he's writing before all of this happens, and he's fairly prescient. It seems fairly prescient, right? Yeah, the only reason Zelensky's still in power because he's virtue signaling like Trudeau. Well, and he's also doing what the Nazis want, right? Like, to me, the thing to talk about and the reason why Ukraine is going to become an ultra-nationalist at least ultra-nationalist country, is because Zelensky has banned left opposition, right? Like, he banned all of the left opposition in Ukraine, but left the Nazis intact. Like, there are people sitting in Ukrainian parliament who are Nazis right now. They are Nazis. Did they get banned? Did their parties get banned? Did they get removed? No, right? So if you remove all of your left opposition, right, your communists and your socialists, right, and even your social democrats, right, if you remove all your left opposition and leave the center and the right and the ultra-nationalists and the Nazis in place, well, what's going to happen? By definition, what's going to happen? The society, or at least the government, is going to become extremely ultra-nationalist. It's going to go in this direction. And so even if there's an agreed settlement where the Donbass, it becomes independent or part of Russia, Crimea is recognized, right? You still have all of this territory, right? You still have this country, Ukraine, that's sitting there becoming more and more ultra-nationalist by the day, right? Very unlikely for me to believe. Like, I'm really just sitting here being like, yeah, like, we maybe you could create the argument, and many people do, with the hand-waving dismissal of the Azov battalion and the Nazis that exist within the Ukrainian military, right? That, oh, well, that's not that big a deal and all that kind of stuff. But this country is going to become extremely far right. Extremely far right. And the Nazi element that exists in the parliament is only going to grow, right? It's only going to get bigger. And so my concern for Ukraine is not that this section is going to break off and become independent. All of that's going to happen. Like, all of that is going to happen. My issue with what's going on in Ukraine is what's going to happen in 10 years. Right? In 10 years after this this system has festered, after the far-right ultra-nationalists and Nazis have festered and grown, and election over election grow and seize more and more power the way that they do, right, through violence and coercion, what are we going to see happen in Ukraine? Right? It seems to me that the trajectory of Ukraine can't be anything except a Nazi uprising, because they've literally eliminated any opposition to it internally. So that's in my view, that is Zelensky's legacy. That you can make the case that Zelensky himself is not a Nazi, but he's definitely paved the road towards it. Eva feels safer living in Russia than she would in Canada, where she says Ukrainian nationalists and Nazi supporters run rampant and could easily harm or kill me. Yeah. And, like, people don't really understand that, like, those Nazi elements aren't in control, right? They're running the show for themselves, which is the reason, like, note how this timeline worked, right? Mariupol fell. This is where the bulk of the Azov battalion was, right? The bulk of the Nazis were, right? And now we're talking about and now Biden is talking about diplomacy, right? Like, my position on it this whole time has been the reason why Zelensky can't negotiate a settlement, the reason why the Americans can't negotiate a settlement, is because they armed Nazis who refused to listen to them, right? Like, they armed an element that is chaos and is chaotic and is hyper-violent and will not respond to them. So what you're seeing is Russia dealing with this problem that the Americans created, and even if the Americans wanted to sue for peace, and even if they wanted to come to a negotiation and come to a diplomatic solution, they can't, because they're not in control of the Nazis, right? So it's not until Russia has crushed this element, it's not until that has occurred that the Americans can come to the table and say, okay, let's negotiate a peace settlement, which is what we're seeing, right? That's what we're seeing. We're seeing the Americans turn away from this endless war rhetoric. We're seeing the Americans turn away from this narrative of defeating Putin. And now it's becoming more about creating a peace settlement. because they know, honestly, they know it's coming anyway. Like that's something that people don't want to accept, is that Russia has gotten itself into a position where it has seized all of its objectives, right? It has control of the Donbass, it has control of Crimea, right? It has seized its objectives, and it's going to enforce those objectives on Ukraine anyway, right? So the question is, how much blood does Ukraine want to lose fighting this pointless endeavor? And the answer to that is not a lot, right? Outside of the Nazi elements, which have largely been defeated, right? Like the fall of Mariupol is fairly significant. Outside of those far right elements, the fighting spirit doesn't exist in the Ukrainian forces. Like they know this war is lost. They know why this war was fought, and so the fight is kind of over. We're just waiting for the dust to clear, and the longer it goes on, the more entrenched the Russian administrative power will become in the Donbass region. Like, we're just playing the waiting game at this point. And it looks like that $40 billion that America sent to Ukraine basically just went to like Lockheed Martin and Raytheon, and they just kept it, more or less. That's really what it looks like. That it just ended up being an excuse to give a bunch of money to some rich arms dealers. And they, in turn, basically said thanks, and that was it. Right? The whole thing was a grift. Boop, boop, beep, boop, boop. Good to see you, Barnabas. Hope you're doing well out there, buddy. Hope you're doing well. Have you connected with anybody from Socialist Action out in British Columbia? I think that idea is a good idea from Barry, because I don't really have many people in British Columbia in my connective group, but I do think Socialist Action does. So hopefully you're reaching out. I still think a lot of it has to do with all the Ukrainian farmland they were prohibited from selling for almost 20 years, but suddenly now they opened it up for corporations to plunder. Yeah. Oh yeah, good stuff. Doing PS MLS stuff. Good to hear, Barnabas. Good to hear you're keeping busy, keeping working. Which reminds me, join the People's School for ML Studies. Absolutely. Always good to remind people, right? People's School for Marxist-Leninist Studies. Right? Here it is. Oh yeah, of course, Eric. I was always going to go back to it. Okay. Russian President Vladimir Putin and other Russian leaders have stated that NATO membership of Ukraine or the building of U.S. and NATO military installations along Russia's borders are uncrossable red lines. Such statements imply threats to use military force. One way to solve peacefully the escalating conflicts between Ukraine and Russia and the civil war in the Donbass is an international agreement involving Ukraine, Russia, the U.S., and the European Union. Such an agreement could offer Ukraine a path to membership in the EU, provided it fulfills accession criteria, stability of institutions guaranteeing democracy, the rule of law, human rights, in exchange for agreeing not to seek NATO membership, and to resolve the conflict in the Donbass based on the Minsk Protocol. However, such a scenario would be difficult to achieve due to the unwillingness to compromise, and because of refusal by the EU to even acknowledge Ukraine as a potential member. Unwillingness of compromise. Yeah, the Nazis aren't willing to compromise, right? Like they don't listen to anyone. They care about themselves exclusively. And I don't know why anyone believes that the EU would want Ukraine, right? Ukraine is one of the most corrupt nations in Europe. It's obviously corrupt. I don't understand why any EU member would be like, let's let Ukraine join. No. Why would we do that? It's an enormous liability. It's going to be extremely costly, right? No reason at all to allow Ukraine into the EU. Like, Ukraine is a country that is tearing itself apart, obviously. Why would we ever allow them into the EU? Seems like such a terrible idea. I'm yet to hear a counter argument to this. right? Why would you ever allow such a corrupt, backwards, obviously plagued with far-right elements country into your federated body? No. Let them collapse. Like, sorry, let them collapse. Like, and you're seeing, right? Like, this piece is going, right? Like, how much longer until, like, these pieces start to break up? Like, do you think Ukraine is going to maintain its stability internally even? Like, they literally banned left opposition. They banned them. Do you think that they are, and the Maidan crisis was a popular uprising, right? Like, do you genuinely think that Ukraine is going to maintain its internal stability? I don't. Like, I sincerely don't. I don't know why anybody, I don't know why Germany, France, Spain, Italy, the UK are looking at Ukraine being like, yeah, part of EU, yeah, let's get this enormous crisis liability in our ranks, for sure. Good financial decision-making happening there. No. Various hawks care little about the potentially disastrous consequences of an escalation of armed hostilities for Ukraine and ordinary Ukrainians. They regard Ukraine only as a tool for geopolitical goals, in particular, the containment of Russia, and they are willing to sacrifice many lives in order to expand Western influence in the region. Of course, we should not expect any direct military involvement by US or NATO forces, because such intervention could easily result in nuclear war. Western and Russian leaders and their media express deeply conflicting views concerning the escalating conflict in Ukraine and its origins. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken and other officials have repeatedly blasted the Kremlin for instigating the crisis along Ukraine's border in an attempt to carve out a sphere of influence. They argue that after the pro-Russian government of Viktor Yanukovych was ousted by peaceful protesters in 2014, dozens of whom were massacred by government snipers, Russia annexed Crimea and launched a hybrid war with Ukraine in the Donbass with the help of Russian proxies. Moreover, Western officials maintain that Ukraine is a sovereign state, which has the right to join NATO. In contrast, Russian leaders insist that the Ukrainian government was overthrown in a fascist push, which led to Crimea voluntarily joining Russia and to a civil war without Russian military involvement in the Donbass. They say that Ukraine has been under de facto NATO rule since 2014 and regard unrecognized separatist republics in the Donbass as independent. And of course, what's interesting about this is that there's like tiny touches of truths on both sides, right? Like the truth lies between these two positions. Like the idea that like these separatists in the Donbass are not also getting support from the Kremlin. Like, of course they are, right? Like, of course they are. So this is like a good encapsulation of both sides, though, and of good positions. I appreciate it. Various evidence presented in studies I have authored, which has been echoed by many other Western scholars who research these issues, show that both of these narratives are inaccurate. Just what I said. Indeed, the question of which side carried out the snipers' massacre is central to understanding one of the bloodiest and most controversial hours of European conflict since the end of the Cold War, and the main tipping point in the escalating conflict between the West and Russia over Ukraine. According to testimonies by over 100 wounded protesters, several dozen prosecution witnesses, and forensic ballistic and medical examinations by government experts, the massacre of the absolute majority of protesters and police at the Maidan Central Square in Kiev on February 20th, 2014, was perpetuated principally by members of the Maidan opposition, specifically its far-right elements. This event precipitated in the violent removal of the corrupt and oligarchic but democratically elected government in Ukraine, touching off a conflict which has since killed more than 13,000 people. Western governments were at least aware of, or de facto backed, the overthrow. The hidden origin of the conflict. The origin of the Ukraine-Russia conflict, which goes back to the violent overthrow of the pro-Russian Yanukovych government in 2014, is often misrepresented, omitted, or even covered up by Western governments and, with some notable exceptions, the mainstream media. Studies I have authored analyzing the Maidan massacre trials, ongoing since their start in 2015, and investigations in Ukraine reveal overwhelming evidence that the Maidan protesters were massacred by snipers positioned within Maidan-controlled buildings, and not by government snipers or Beirut riot policemen, who have been accused of picking off dozens of demonstrators. Such studies include a peer-reviewed article, a book chapter, and papers and video appendices presented at major academic conferences, including at the recent virtual World Congress of the International Council for Central and East European Studies in Montreal. With some notable exceptions, such evidence was not reported by the Western media, which, from the start, blamed government snipers and the Beirut police for the massacre of the Maidan protesters on the orders of then-President Yanukovych. Such evidence includes videos, testimonies by more than 100 wounded protesters and several hundred other witnesses, including several dozen prosecution and defense witnesses at the Maidan massacre trial and investigation, of forensic ballistic and medical examinations by government experts. Synchronized videos show that specific times and directions of shooting of the absolute majority of the protesters did not coincide with the specific times and the approximate direction of live ammunition fire by the special Beirut police unit. 3 protesters were killed and 10 wounded even before this unit appeared in the Maidan. Synchronized video footage also shows that the killings of the protesters practically stopped after the government sniper units were deployed to the regime-controlled areas near the epicenter of the protest. The videos alone prove beyond any doubt that Beirut and government snipers did not massacre the Maidan protesters. Dozens of members of commanders of government sniper units testified as prosecution witnesses at the Maidan massacre trial that they were ordered to locate and neutralize snipers who killed and wounded the Beirut policemen. They also testified that they came under fire by snipers from Maidan-controlled buildings and areas. Even the official investigation determined that Yanukovych government snipers did not massacre the Maidan protesters. It recently charged an Omega Special Forces unit sniper with killing 1 protester. But videos, photos, and forensic examinations by government experts, and trial testimonies of 2 protesters, both of whom were next to him, revealed that he was shot in the back from a steep direction by a corroded bullet from a Maidan-controlled building when he faced the government positions. Videos released by the BBC, Ukraine's ICTV, and various other footage, including unbroadcasted segments of the most famous video of the Maidan massacre by Belgium's public service broadcaster VRT, showed snipers in the Maidan-controlled buildings shooting the protesters and the police, and dozens of the protesters and journalists pointing out snipers there. The government investigation revealed that a sniper, who was filmed shooting at the BBC crew and at protesters in the BBC and ICTV videos, did this from a Hotel Ukrainia room in which one of the leaders of the far-right Svobia party then lived. The absolute majority of wounded Maidan protesters testified at the Maidan massacre trial and investigation that they were shot by snipers from Maidan-controlled buildings or witnessed such snipers there. Even the official investigation determined, based on their testimonies and investigative experiments, that almost half of the wounded protesters were shot from sectors other than government positions and did not charge anyone with their shooting. Forensic medical examinations by government experts tasked with investigating the Maidan massacre determined that the absolute majority of the protesters were shot from the side and back and top to bottom directions when they faced the Beirut police on the ground. This is consistent with their shooting from Maidan-controlled buildings. The entry and exit wounds locations of 3 of the killed Maidan protesters, mapped using a 3D model which was produced by a New York architecture company for the Maidan victims' lawyers and was heralded by the New York Times, do not match the wound locations in the forensic medical examinations by government experts. Consequently, they could not have been shot from the government-held positions. Further wound and bullet hole locations in shields and helmets point to shooting from the Maidan-controlled buildings. Forensic examinations by government ballistic experts determined in about a dozen cases that the protesters were shot from the Maidan-controlled structures, including the Hotel Ukrainia. It is revealing that the prosecution failed for almost 8 years after the massacre to use ballistic experts in determining the locations of the shooters in the absolute majority of cases, even after the Maidan massacre trial ordered this to be completed. A forensic ballistic examination conducted by the government experts using an automated computer system found that bullets from killed protesters did not match bullet samples from the police database of Berkut Kalashnikov assault rifles. No evidence of any order by Yanukovych or his ministers and commanders to fire upon the Maidan protesters has been revealed by the investigation nor the media. Not a single member of his government, police, or security forces admitted involvement in the massacre or revealed any evidence that the protesters were shot by the government forces or specifically on a government order. In contrast, there is evidence to the involvement of Maidan leaders, the far right, and foreign snipers in the massacre of the police and the protesters. Several Maidan leaders and activists provided testimonies, while 14 self-admitted members of the Maidan sniper units admitted in media interviews and to the Maidan massacre trial that they themselves and other Maidan snipers shot at the police and protesters. Several former members of the Georgian military testified that they and other groups of Maidan snipers in the Hotel Ukrainia and the Music Conservatory were ordered by specific Maidan leaders and the ex-Georgian leaders to fire on police and protesters that they witnessed the massacre. What's more, a retired Georgian officer also claimed that Georgian snipers linked to Mikhail Saakashvili, ex-president of Georgia, and senior members of his party and the government were involved in the Maidan massacre. The prosecution and the Maidan victims' lawyer claim these Georgians were actors, even though their identities are confirmed by various evidence, such as documents by the Ukrainian, Armenian, Belarusian, and Georgian authorities. A video testimony of them was recently admitted as evidence and shown at the Maidan massacre trial. Two leaders of the far-right Svoboda party also stated in separate interviews that a Western government representative told them and other Maidan leaders a few weeks before the massacre that Western governments would stop recognizing Yanukovych after casualties among protesters reached 100. Such specific conditionally created incentives to sacrifice protesters and attribute their killing to government forces. The slain protesters were called the Heavenly Hundred, even after the official investigation confirmed that 49 protesters died on that day. Immediately after the massacre, Western governments blamed the Yanukovych government and his forces for the mass killing and recognized the new Maidan government. The investigation by the Ukrainian government denies that there were any snipers in Maidan-controlled buildings, despite overwhelmingly evidence that they perpetrated a mass killing of protesters and police on February 20th, 2014. It is striking that almost 8 years after the massacre, which was verified by videos, testimonies, witnesses, and forensic ballistic and medical examinations by government experts, nobody has been arrested or convicted. Without understanding the Maidan massacre and bringing to justice its perpetrators, it is impossible to understand and resolve peacefully the internal and international conflicts involving Ukraine and the dangerously escalating war in the Donbass. That's a good article, Eric. That's a good article, bud. Real solid, bud. Real solid. How you guys all doing? I saw somebody sneak in here. Who was it? It was Kaya? I'm sorry, I cannot remember this. Kaya? Kaya, I'm going to keep showing up to Friday's open mic night. Not this Friday. I'm going out to Manitoba for my uncle's funeral. A good opportunity to tell you guys that there's not going to be a show on the 9th, which I think is Thursday, because I'm in Manitoba, and I don't think I'm going to be back until Tuesday. So I'm going to miss a couple of shows because I'm in Manitoba. I'll put that in the Discord as well, just to remind everybody. But no show on Thursday, no show on Monday, and I'm not going to be showing at that open mic night. But I will be doing that open mic night every Friday subsequent, because I found it to be a very enriching experience. Imagine being a private company, having a client that's the government. Yeah, no kidding. I heard Zelensky is a Trudeau fan. I mean, they're very similar to one another. They're just haircuts. Hitler compromised with that bullet in his brain, yeah. dude, the Hitler trials would have been crazy if he lived. In my view, that is why Hitler had to die. Because I think Hitler being on trial would have been too damning for the West. That the West really worked with Hitler and worked and like Hitler's ascension is tied in to the shittiness of the Allies, right? So it would have been way too illuminating. So they had to shoot that guy, or he suicided or whatever. Was there a fuss with the Baltics joining? I know they're so small, so no harm, no foul. Hitler turd, yeah. Horrible footage, yeah. There's a poster in the break room at my work that says Canada stands with Ukraine, and hearing this article makes me want to graffiti it. Yeah, like all that Canada like stands with Ukraine, all that kind of shit. Like it's so brutal. Like it is. It's so super brutal, and because of how tied in to the Liberal Party the Ukrainian movement is, it's never going to go away. Like, it's never going to go away. It will literally be, until we actually see a leader of Ukraine, like, doing Nazi salutes in the parliament, like, until that starts to happen, this Stand With Ukraine stuff is going to persist. And it's not like they're going to suddenly give up their support for Ukraine or give up on any of this kind of stuff. It's just that they'll know to shut up about it once the Nazi salutes begin. Which in my view is what happens in Ukraine. Because it has to. I don't see how it can't. Calling me ahoy there, matey. He has a link to his original research, which is 60 pages long. Oh, goodness. What did I miss? People are saying I'm so sorry. What? I missed something. I'm so sorry. Family first. Oh, yeah, okay. Never mind. You're 10,000% correct, John. I forgot the names, but Goring or whatever talked with the British about finishing what the Nazis started if Nazi Germany would fall. Yeah. Like, and they immediately turned towards the Soviet Union and immediately started talking about destroying it, right? Like the Nazis tried to destroy the Soviets, it didn't work, and so the Allies started a plan to destroy it. And the only thing that saves the Soviet Union is the building of the nuclear bomb, right? Like that's it. That's the only thing that actually saves them. And but we've got the evidence. We know that the Allies were planning to invade the Soviet Union. Well, and I feel a bit guilty, Kaya, because I had to leave. Whereas the next Fridays I'm going to stick around, so we can make a proper night of it. And I think I'm going to start inviting the Socialist Action guys out to it, right? Just turn it into something of a social event. Like, why shouldn't we? Like we talk all the time about organizing. Well, let's organize and let's turn this into like a regular event, like a regular like Friday night open mic night at this place. I'm sure the business will be happy about it. Yeah. Oh, look, we're 80 years later, the U.S. is taking the head on ending Russia. Yeah. Well, and we'll see how that goes, right? Like the Americans, like one of the major parties, the Republicans, are talking about leaving NATO, right? Let the Europeans deal with it, right? And places like Germany are responding to this, right? They're upping their military budget. So like, you could see a situation where America bails, and I mean, America is about to fall into a Great Depression, right? Like we're heading in, like this is it, guys. This is the Roaring 20s. We're here. Like the Roaring 20s are upon us, right? Like we're all pretending as though like we're gonna, everything's gonna be fine, but the collapse is happening. I am torn on this idea, Barnabas. U.S. leaving NATO, right? I'm torn because it's not like Europe has a big long history of peace. Right? It's not like Europe has this big long history of peacefully organizing with one another and trading and being fine, right? The history of Europe is extremely bloody, overwhelmingly bloody, right? Like they're constantly in fights with one another. They're constantly going to war with one another. Like the catastrophe of you think about the catastrophe of World War I, right? And that was not enough for the European nations. They had to have a second one. Like the industrialization of war wasn't gruesome enough. They had to do a second one. Oh shit. And so the only thing that's keeping Europe, in my view, from descending into another internal conflagration is the fact that Daddy US is there, right? And Daddy US won't let them, right? But if Daddy US pulls out, right, and goes off and does his own thing, well, then the kids are going to bicker, right? And that's not great. Like, but it goes the other way too. Like, I see your point, right? That the U.S. is the empire, right? It is the imperial core, right? And the U.S. pulling out of here does indicate a sign of a waning empire, and we really could go through a period of time like the British Empire waned and disintegrated, but it really transferred, right? It really transferred to the United States. So the empire didn't cease to exist. It just, the heart of it changed, right? And it moved over, and now it's moving over, but now we're experiencing a proper decline, right? And so what is that going to look like? And how are we all going to deal with it? Bleach demons? What? What are we talking about? What's happening? I don't know what's happening in the chat. Yet the kids are disobeying now. Daddy is going for a pack of smokes and not coming back. Yeah. I mean, I think it's actually much more cynical, right? Which is like, you kids are costing me too much. So I'm just going to go, I don't see why I have to pay for this. So, hundreds protest North America's largest weapons fairs, right? Like, this is a good idea, right? Like, these guys are arms salesmen. Like, we know what they're doing, right? Going and protesting their stuff? Absolutely. Absolutely, positively. I'm going to save this one. Oh, yeah. Like, when the USA bombs, when Russia bombs Ukraine, right? Like, it's totally the truth. Cambodia, Kuwait, Lebanon, Nicaragua, Palestine, Panama, Somalia, Vietnam, Yugoslavia, Bosnia, Guatemala, El Salvador, China, Congo, Cuba, Korea, Peru, Sudan, Iran, Korea, Indonesia, Laos, Iraq, Pakistan, Syria, Yemen, Afghanistan, Libya. Like, oh, you like this one, bud? You like this one? Here, I'll put this in the memes. Memes. Now we have it forever. Barnabas. That's so weird. That's hilarious, dude. So this is one to point out. What's his name here? The Good Politics guy, right? Who I love but hate because he's better looking than I am. How dare you, sir? Your handsome face.
So we started.
Look at how handsome this guy is. Fuck you. And but he does a really good read up about what happened at Uvalde, right? And specifically focusing at how the police worked to keep parents like this mother from going into the school. One of the things that's coming out of Uvalde is there's more and more questions surrounding the police for their participation or lack of participation in the conversation. That questions are beginning to surround the police as to why they didn't go in, why they were so willing to allow the active shooter, how tied into this narrative are they actually. And now you're starting to see stories of the Uvalde police refusing to cooperate with state officials, federal officials, right? And so it's looking more and more, right, in battered Uvalde, where a police chief is in hiding, grief gives way to calls for accountability. Lots of people are beginning to speculate, and it is speculation, that the Uvalde police force had a hand in all of this, and that the reason why they don't want to be accountable is because there's something to uncover, right? Like, it's not just we stood by and did nothing because of our personal safety. It's more and more coming to look like we stood by and did nothing because this is what we wanted. And is there some memo that's going to come out? Is there some piece of evidence? The Uvalde police are acting as though there is, right? They are acting as though they have something to hide. And so that's why I'm putting a light on this story and sending people over to sources that have done better work on it than I have, because I think there's more to this story than just police being cowards. Like, we'll see. We'll see how it all shakes out. I don't know if it's a false flag. I don't know what. It is all speculative at this point. But even if it isn't, right? Even if it isn't speculative, even if it is like even if it is as straightforward as like the police just stood by and waited, like, and watched the shooter do all this stuff, that's not a great narrative either, right? And the narrative that has seized hold, and I've seen around the populace a lot, which makes all the sense in the world to me, is, well, if the argument is the way to stop a bad guy with a gun is with a good guy with a gun, well, where's the good guy? Like, where's the good guy with the gun, right? It's not these guys, right? And so the whole argument's falling apart. And now we're literally talking about arming teachers while not paying them a living wage. Like, this is the disgusting part about it. Being a teacher in the United States is already not paying a living wage. It's already like being denigrated. Like, it's already being shit on. We're not helping these people out at all. And now we're turning around and saying, yeah, let's arm them to protect students. Like, if I'm a teacher, I'm out. I'm out. Like, I don't know why any of these guys, I don't know why anybody would be a teacher in the United States, right? I don't know why anybody would be a teacher in the United States. Like, it's proof positive that the people who are teachers are doing it because they have a passion and a desire to do it. Because there's no real reason to do it. It's not paying you. It's not providing you the living that you need. Go be a bartender. You're gonna get more money being a bartender than you are gonna be a teacher, right? And like, why be part of this absurd system that is suddenly telling you, oh yeah, by the way, in order to also earn this, you have to have a gun and shoot shooters as they come in. Like, what are you talking about? The current U.S. admin love doing false flags in Ukraine. Yeah, arm the textbooks. Now we're talking, Barnabas. Arm the textbooks. Make it so a kid can throw a textbook at a shooter and it'll blow up. I love it. Yeah, my mom bringing a shotgun to work. Like, it's just so fucked up. Like, it's so fucked up. Like, what's happening in the United States is just outright, like, it's crazed. There's no other word to use to describe it. It's barbarous. It's crazed what is happening. And the idea that people are even participating in it is just absolutely insane. And fun fact, it's not going to get better. It's not going to get better. If anything, we're going to see more shootings, right? Things are going to get more aggressive. Because that's the nature of the civil war that's brewing in the United States, right? And a civil war that's going to kick off in serious ways. Like, and once that civil war really flies in, right? It's going to be like wildfire, right? It's just going to spark like crazy. Good to see you, Alex. Good to see you, bud. Food banks stretch thin as food prices rise, increasing hunger and food insecurity. Keep voting conservative and liberals, guys. Keep voting conservative and liberals, right? More and more, I look at the results of what happened here in Ontario. And the story, in my view, isn't that Ford won another term. It's that 57% of the population didn't even turn out. Hey, Rusty, how you doing? 57% of the populace didn't even show up, right? 57%. That is an indictment. And that's not an indictment of the Ford conservatives. That's an indictment of the system of capital itself, right? That the populace looked at its options and said, these are all worthless. They're all corrupt. They're all bought in. It doesn't matter who we vote for. It's irrelevant, and they stayed home, right? And in my view, it is 100% because none of these supposed leftists in the run were willing to name the name, right? They weren't willing to say that the problem is capital. And so the populace did the right thing, right? What have I been saying all the time on this channel? The number one thing that we should be doing is not participating. Stop participating in this system of death. Stop consuming. Stop participating in the system of death. And so the way to not participate in an election is to simply not vote, right? That's not participating. And it's not like, and I don't think it's voter apathy, right? It's being called apathy because that's a convenient thing to do, to blame the victim, right? But it's not apathy. It's literally like, these guys are worthless, I'm not going to support them. That's not apathy, right? That's not going, oh ho hum, the result doesn't matter. That's being very forcefully saying, no, the result doesn't matter. Like, if Horvath became the premier, would things dramatically change? No. There wouldn't be a significant shift in the way things operated. There would still be owners, you would still be owned, right? Like, that's what would occur. My Buddhist meditation instructor that got me into activism told me to vote liberal. What a joke. Yeah. Time to find a new Buddhist meditation instructor, dude. Like, vote liberal. What the fuck are you talking about? The liberals get completely decimated. And in a way, like, it's the right thing for the populace to have done, because what we're doing by abandoning these parties, which is what we're doing, is we're killing the capitalist system. We're killing the structure. We're just starting with the smiling face, right? That the lesser of two evils argument is no longer holding weight anymore, because the populace is saying, yeah, but it's still evil, right? So it's just not voting for the lesser of two evils, which is the smiling face of capital, right? Which is the liberals and the NDP and the Greens. They're just not doing it. So they're saying, look, if we're going to do this capitalist bullshit, let's get the actual fascists. Let's get the actual far-right people. Fuck this lesser of two evils. The only people that we are going to support are people who are willingly and saying out loud, right? Who are saying out loud, we have to fight capitalism. That the problem is capitalism itself. And any leader of any political party that is standing up and is refusing to say these exact words, the problem is capitalism and we have to transition away from capitalism using a socialist agenda, if they are not saying those words, they cannot be trusted. Period. That they should not, they don't deserve our votes, they don't deserve our support. We do not need to vote for anybody out of any sense of consciousness or guilt, because those people, Andrea Horvath, Stephen Del Duca, Mike Schreier, are not working for us. They're not our allies. They are working for capital, and they are working to maintain the system of capital, and we were right to abandon them, because they've already abandoned us. I went communist. I voted communist. Right? Every alley counts, right? I voted communist, but I completely understand why people didn't vote, and I'm not standing here saying it's your civic duty, and if you didn't vote, then you don't have the right to have an opinion. Of course you have the right to have an opinion. Of course you have the fucking right to have an opinion. What a garbage point. Oh, you didn't go vote for these treasonous, betraying, abandonment-filled losers? Oh, you don't have the right to have an opinion. Of course you do. And your opinion is, these guys are losers and I'm not supporting any of them. Right? Yeah, and again, I'm not going to shit on anybody for voting NDP or going with the lesser of two evils sort of thing, all of that kind of stuff. But if I'm not going to shit on you, then don't shit on the position that, like, yeah, why would anybody? Like, there's absolutely nothing wrong with people staying home on this one. Like, until we're finally actually saying the evil that we're facing is capitalism, and we need to dismantle it and destroy it. Until people are saying that, yeah, people stay home, and they should. there's been so much anti-socialist propaganda fed to the populace for decades. People are scared of socialism because they think it's something scary. That's ending, though. That's ending. It's going to go the way of reefer madness, and it already is going the way of reefer madness, right? Like the younger populace doesn't think that way, and the older people are dying. It's as simple as that. The older people are dying. So like these old losers who think that communism is evil while they bomb like Yugoslavia or whatever, they're gonna die, right? And you can see it in all the polls. Like all the polls show this is the case. Like the rise of Bernie Sanders in the United States, right? Like people are no longer afraid of the word socialism, and as time moves forward, and as capitalism proves to everybody that it's a system of abandonment and extraction, and it's going to be ruthless and tirelessly ruthless. This idea that the nations that are calling themselves socialist are experiencing economic booms and everybody's doing much better, right? Like it's going to become self-evident, right? It's going to become self-evident. No, I saw this same poll that you're talking about, Adam, which is that young Canadians are not right-leaning. They're more willing to vote conservative, and that's different, right? Like, here in Canada, the right-wing party in Canada right now are the Liberals, right? Like, the Liberals are actually the right-wing party at the moment, and the Conservatives are slightly to the left of them. I think the populace is showing a willingness to vote Conservative because they want to get rid of these Liberals, is what they want. And it's classic Canadiana, right? Vote Conservative, vote Liberal, vote Conservative, vote Liberal, right? It's just classic Canadian thinking. I don't think that indicates that Canadians are right-leaning. Quite to the contrary. I think that it shows that Canadians want a more left-wing government and see the only and don't see the far-right liberal government and the moderate right NDP, which is propping it up, as legitimate, right? So they want to vote for the leftmost party that they can vote for, and that's the Conservatives right now. Like, that's what's happening. Like, that's how fucked up our politics is right now in Canada. Like, that's how fucked up we are. That the Conservatives are actually the leftmost party right now, right? Well, the leftmost party with a bit of credibility, right? Like, the NDP Liberal Pact has really ended up alienating most Canadians. It's not what most Canadians want to see. And my position on it, I don't mind that Jugmeat tried, right? That's not what bothers me about it, right? I don't mind that. But now that it's obviously a failure, and it's obviously a failure, it has not resulted in what the NDP wanted it to. We have experienced a surge in support for Conservatives. Pierre Poilievre is a very, very effective speaker. He argues well, and people are going to like him, right? They already do like him. Jagmeet Singh needs to abandon this NDP Liberal Pact. He needs to start actually pushing these Liberals to actually do something actually. But he's not going to, because he's only interested in being the leader of the NDP. He's not actually interested in any of these policies. He's not actually interested in anything, right? Like if I'm the NDP right now, given the political specter, I am pushing for the basic income. Like, that's what I'm doing, right? Like, it's very telling that the NDP are not pushing on that right now, because it's obvious. It's for sure something the populace wants. And the NDP are in exactly the position to push the Liberals on it under threat of just dissolving the government, which is exactly what they should be doing. And they're not. So in the end, the NDP just end up being a lesser wing of a far-right Liberal party. Like, if you don't think the Liberals are far-right party at this stage in the game, then you're literally not paying attention. The evocation of the Emergencies Act alone It's the most severe far right act that has happened in this country since World War II. Find another one. Find another thing that has happened in this country that's further to the right than the evocation of the Emergency Measures Act. It's a War Measures Act that he evoked because some truckers were blocking a bridge. It's an extreme act, like a far right fringe act for anyone to have done, and it's our liberal government that did it. They got universal dental care. Oh, have they? Has that happened? No. I've seen a lot of propaganda about how it's going to happen. Has it happened?